Okay, so let's be honest, at least in my house, the scariest thing about Halloween is not the costumes or the haunted houses, it's the candy bag. And especially the one that your kids are going to be bringing home at the end of the night. So I am talking about like the neon colored, preservative packed, hyper processed candy that most parents normally wouldn't buy for their kids, but suddenly on Halloween, we feel pressured to let them indulge. And maybe you have wondered this yourself, like, if I take it away, does that make me the bad guy? Right? Will limiting candy cause problems like eating disorders? I have heard that many, many times. Will saying no just make them want it more? So today we're going to unpack a lot of these different topics around Halloween candy, and some of the research that I actually did into some of these topics. What's in it, what causes eating disorders and what doesn't, and what you can do instead, which is going to be really valuable, of how can we, let our kids have a great time without being like, the fun police, right? So here we go. So first, we're going to talk about what's in the bags of candy, right? What's in them themselves. So most candy that I have found is made up of a couple of things. So one of them is food dyes. Next are preservatives, corn syrup or hydrogenated oils. And those are like probably the biggest ones that we're going to talk about here today. So first, the food dyes. Okay, so you've probably heard of things like red 40, yellow 5, blue 1. If you haven't, turn over a package of some of the candy and you will find it there. They're in things like Skittles, Starburst, M&Ms, Sour Patch Kids, Jolly Ranchers, basically all of the cool, popular Halloween candy and the things that we as children were eating for years. But what most parents are not realizing is that these dyes are not just colors. They're made from petroleum. Yes, the same petroleum that fuels your car. But here's the kicker. They're starting to rename these dyes so that you don't notice. So instead of seeing red 40, you might see something like Allura Red AC or Red 40 Lake. It's the same chemical with a different name. And in Europe, they require warning labels on anything that contains these ingredients that actually says may cause hyperactivity in children. But here in the US, they're not required, at least not yet, to add this warning label. It's the same candy, but a different label, which is really infuriating to me personally. So let's just talk really quick about what it does to the body. And I feel like with this new administration and Bobby Kennedy as the Health and Human Services Secretary, we are starting to see that there is more pressure on these companies to remove these dyes, because even though, like I said, they do have the same exact things overseas with warning labels, they also have made alternative products that don't contain some of these that they do sell to other countries as well, that have actually banned the product, right? Like, so some countries have banned these dyes and they have different formulations already created for them, not for us. But it's, again, really infuriating to me. So what does this actually do to the body, and why do we not want our kids to have it? So we have seen with research that these dyes do trigger hyperactivity and focus issues in sensitive children. That meltdown after trick-or-treating or eating some of the candy is not always sugar-related. The dyes can fire up their nervous system. And some studies even show that in animals, there's DNA damage and gut microbiome changes, which I find scary. All right, so we already know there's already a lot of literature about the dyes. Let's move on to preservatives. Preservatives are things like TBHQ, BHT. You might have heard of these before, maybe not. You'll find these in things like Reese's peanut butter, Butterfingers, and even some chocolate coatings. And on paper, they call them antioxidants, but in the body, they actually just stress your immune system out. So if your child's immune system is already working hard because it's that cold and flu season, then we're going to pile on preservatives to make it even harder. But again, a lot of these preservatives are completely banned in other countries because they know that these side effects of them are not tested. They're not tested for safety before they are put into the products. And we know this because they're considered GRAS, generally recognized as safe. But to get that sort of designation as generally safe, basically it's the companies telling the government that, we feel it's safe. And the government saying, okay, if you say so. There's no actual person testing to make sure that anything on the GRAS list is actually safe. So that's my big problem with it. How do we know exactly what is going into these products if nobody is even looking at the safety of the ingredients? A problem I find. Then there's corn syrup and hydrogenated oils. So think Laffy Taffy nerds, airheads. These are going to spike your blood sugar really fast, giving kids that like wild energy surge followed by the crash. Hydrogenated oils, they are often hidden in things like chocolate bars with Snickers and Twix. They're basically trans fats in disguise. They inflame the body, mess with your energy, and there are no nourishing things in any of these candies at all. Okay. We know that there is research that corn syrup is probably one of the worst things that you could be eating, especially giving it to kids. And these oils, we know that these hydrogenated oils, these trans fats are not good. They're not like the energy or the fats that you want in your body, right? Of course, there's good fats and good oils, like from avocado oil or olive oil, but these are not going to be doing anything for your brain at all. It's just going to be piling on not just calories, like forget about calories, but it's just piling on like inflammation in the body, right? And the combination effect of all of these different ingredients together is like a little chemical cocktail in the body. Things like, when we're talking about sugar as well as these ingredients, remember, the sugar alone is a topic for a different day, but the sugar really, amplifies, I would say, the effects of all of these different preservatives and dyes, because it's basically, sending that signal to your brain that you're starving, you haven't eaten. So please eat more. And eat more of this specifically. Remember, these companies that create the products specifically create them with these, they call natural flavors, which are not natural at all. But what they're doing is basically creating something that tastes addictive, that you're going to want more of. It gives your brain a little hit of dopamine every time you taste it. So not only is the sugar addictive, but the ingredients themselves become addictive. All right. So, these are things that we don't really want. I don't want my kids eating. And yes, you could say, oh, I ate it as a kid and I was fine. But I'm sure there's probably a laundry list of things that have happened in your life and maybe you're not attributing to them. But I know my generation, as I guess I'd be considered the millennial, a lot of us are having autoimmune conditions and difficulty with fertility, getting pregnant. It's pretty pervasive, and it's like, well, maybe the cumulative effects of our childhoods and eating all of this garbage has, kind of is starting to catch up a little bit, right? And I want my children to avoid that personally. So when we say candy is junk food, we're not talking about just sugar. It's really that chemical cocktail of the combination of all of those things that their brains and bodies have to process. And I know some people are going to say, don't ever call food junk food because it could cause disordered eating. Personally, I don't agree with that. I grew up hearing the word junk food, and I never once thought that I'm bad for liking this. And I did not develop an eating disorder from it. And you might say, well, that's anecdotal, Christine. Like, that doesn't mean just because it didn't happen to you that it doesn't happen to other people. Totally true. However, I did some research into this, which we're going to get into next. But let's be real, candy is literally junk food. It's made of nothing good for you. It's not fuel, it's not nourishing. Calling it food is a misnomer, in my opinion, and it's not helping your kids grow stronger. So why are we sugarcoating it? That being said, if the word makes you uncomfortable, maybe you can call it a sometimes food or a fun food. The point isn't the label so much, it's the message, right? And here's the key. What actually leads to eating disorders isn't whether you use the word junk food. It's what fuels eating disorders are things like shame, secrecy, dieting, constant body criticism, not saying this candy is a fun food, but it doesn't help our bodies run well. So don't overthink the word. What matters is that your child hears confidence and clarity, not shame. So let's pause here because I know there's a lot of talk online, especially for some reason from a lot of dietitians on Instagram about how we should never call foods junk food or bad foods. And some have even gone as far as saying, just allow your child to naturally, stop eating when they feel like they want to, which I have a huge issue with. One, because it literally hijacks our brain and is created and formulated in a lab to make it addicting. And adults have a hard time stopping eating when they start. How are you going to expect a child to regulate their own, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, let's define very clearly what an eating disorder is. It is a serious mental health condition. It includes things like anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorders, and yes, ARFID. And while ARFID does overlap with picky eating, the root causes are very different and medical. And it's a whole episode for another time. And I do have episodes and blog posts about differences in ARFID and some issues that I have with people throwing that name around a lot. But here's what matters for this conversation. If you say no to unlimited candy, that does not cause eating disorders. But how we talk about food and frame it over time does matter, right? So there is some small smidgen of truth to it. But again, it's not about saying no, and it's not about saying no to the food, and it's not about which words you use, right? Eating disorders are rooted in a mix of genetic, psychological, and environmental factors. And we cannot control genetics, sure, but we absolutely can control the environment that we create at home. So here are 4 things that research shows can increase your risk of developing an eating disorder. Repeated comments about weight or body size. So if kids who grow up hearing criticism about their body, like, oh, you sure you're going to eat that? That might make you gain weight, or that might make you bigger, right? That's about shaming. So that would be a no-go. We don't want to do that. Tying food to worth is number 2. So when kids hear you're good if you eat this and you're bad if you eat that, not that the food is bad, saying that they are bad, like they are a bad person for eating it. That internalizes the idea that our food choices are giving us some sort of value. And that's not true. We never suggest that. Shame is what fuels these eating disordered patterns. Okay, number 3, using food as punishment or reward. Finish your broccoli or no dessert. You did great, so let's get ice cream. These tactics teach kids that food becomes like a currency, and a currency for getting what they want, or even sometimes your love. Like, mommy's going to be mad at you if you don't eat this or do eat this. So anything that's tying food to like your worth or a reward or love is going to be something that could definitely fuel eating disorders for sure. Secrecy and shame around food is number 4. So if candy is hidden and kids are shamed for eating it, they learn to sneak food. That secret eating pattern is a huge red flag for binge eating and food anxiety later in life. So again, it's not about calling the food bad. It's not about telling kids, no, you're not going to eat that, or no, you're done eating that for now. That doesn't cause eating disorders. It's things like repeated comments about body weight and size, tying food to their worth, using food as rewards and punishment, and secrecy and shame around food. Those are things that can really trigger eating disorders later in life. Okay. But the word junk food itself isn't actually the problem, despite what the dietitians are saying online. I grew up hearing that term, as many of you probably did, and the harm, again, comes from food language that's tied to your identity. You're bad if you eat this. Very different from saying candy is junk food. It's fun sometimes, but it doesn't fuel your body. Those are two totally different comments and conversations. So let me give you some perspective here, because this is where it gets really shady. Because again, I did my research. The food industry, same companies like soda, candy, sugary cereals, they have literally paid dietitians and influencers to push the idea that there are no bad foods and that calling candy junk is harmful. In fact, in a recent investigation by the Washington Post and The Examination, they found dozens of registered dietitians with big Instagram and TikTok followings paid to post pro-sugar messages. We're talking about dietitians telling kids if your child is obsessed with sweets to give them more access, not less. And behind the scenes, these posts are bankrolled by the Canadian Sugar Institute. And it gets worse. Giant cereals like General Mills launched a campaign literally called Derail the Shame. They paid influencers to tell people not to food shame sugary cereals. So think about that. Instead of lowering the sugar in their products, they hired health professionals to convince you that the problem is your mindset, not their product. Think about that. I'm going to say that again. They hired health professionals, licensed health professionals, to convince you the problem is you, your mindset, not their product. And it's not just influencers. The Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the organization that trains and certifies dietitians in the US, has accepted millions of dollars from Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, Hershey, and General Mills. They own stock in some of those same companies. So when you hear a message like, there are no bad foods, only bad diets, you have to ask, is that science, or are they sponsored and paid to talk about that? So here's the bottom line. Food neutrality as an idea probably started with great intentions, reducing shame around eating. But when soda and candy companies hijacked it, it became a marketing strategy. If we never call a food what it is, if we never say that candy is junk, we're going to keep buying it. Okay. And that's exactly what they want us to do. So let's separate the two things. Yes, shame, secrecy, body shaming, body judging words can harm kids and are linked to eating disorders. Clear boundaries, honest language are not harmful. They build resilience, in my opinion. So if you're comfortable calling candy junk food, call it that. If you prefer fun food, sometimes food, that works too. The point isn't the exact word. The point is the tone and the underlying feelings and message that you're giving kids behind it. Boundaries with love keeps kids safe, and shame is what's going to be doing the damage. So, I mean, if this kind of problem is recurring, we work with a lot of kids who like we said, ARFID is one of the eating disorders, and pediatric feeding disorder sounds like it should be under eating disorders, but is really a lot more complicated. It's why I created the Picky Eater quiz. You can just, in a couple of minutes, discover your child's eating level. Are they in the fearful stage, stuck stage, or curious stage? And you'll get personalized next steps to start making progress now. What I want you to do is go to the pickyeaterstest.com. It takes about 2 minutes. You'll get your child's level and you'll know where you should be starting. Okay. Now let's dive into what to do instead about this candy thing. Because the reality is, they're going to come home with a bag full of candy. They're going to be exposed to it at school, on sports teams, etc. Here are some strategies that I love and use for making Halloween fun without letting the candy bag take over. Okay, so one is called the Switch Witch or the Candy Fairy, if you've ever heard of them. It's basically where your child is going to be trading their candy for a toy or book or an experience. And candy can become part of the tradition, but it doesn't have to be like the main event that they're eating. So, right, the idea is you kind of put out the candy and the Switch Witch or the Candy Fairy is going to take it and in its place leave something. Kind of like when you lose a tooth, put it under the pillow and you get a coin in exchange for your tooth, right? So it's the same sort of idea. Now, for older kids, you can do like a buyback. So sometimes dentists or charities will even do this. Kids can sell their candy and feel proud of giving it up. It's really then their choice. Would you rather have, and it could be something like, like if they're playing some sort of game like Roblox, there's like bucks or, maybe they're earning something in the game. It could be something like that. And you're basically saying, okay, well, forever, for this many, pieces of candy or whatever, you'll get X amount of dollars or Roblox bucks or whatever it is. And then it's really their choice. Well, what's more important to them? Is it the candy or is it getting this stuff in this game? Whatever. You can do some sort of a trade system, like let them pick a few pieces and then the rest goes away. Like, give me your top 5 and you can have those. So this is, for those parents that are really nervous about restricting, this is a good way to limit the amount, but you're still teaching moderation and choice. I'd say we really want to keep the focus of Halloween on costumes and magic and creativity and community and having fun with friends and maybe even, what was I going to say? The parties and things that go with it. A strategy I use for sure at home is teaching food labels. So whenever we're looking at candy or snacks, I'll point to an ingredient and I'll say, this one's not good for your body and here's why. I try not to just leave it at no because I said so. Like that, I don't think that's a great strategy. I always promise that if it's not this, you can have something better. So it's this or something better. So, you got Sour Patch Kids. I know these look very exciting. But there are a lot of great alternatives. So Yum Earth is a great brand that has sort of tried to emulate the different types of candies like Skittles and, I don't even know, gummy bears, things like that, Starburst. So even like Sour Patch Kids, they have like sort of like organic versions of those things that definitely are on the better side. I'm not saying they're perfect. But I always say this or something better. So, if this is what you want, I'll get you, the better version of it. Or we'll get something completely better. Like instead of, for my son, there is nothing that tops ice cream or chocolate chip cookies. So if I'm like, you know what, I don't love the ingredients in this one because of this reason, it's not good for your brain or your belly or whatever it is. How about, would you like some ice cream instead? And I know that the ice cream I buy is organic. There's no preservatives. It's made with like 3 or 4 ingredients, like ice cream's supposed to be made. And he always is more than happy to give up the candy to get the ice cream. So I try to promise this or something better. So if I say, mommy said no to this food, I'll try to follow it up with some of the favorites that they could choose from instead, or an experience perhaps that he can choose from instead, or going someplace special that I know he likes. That would be more motivating than the candy, right? And again, notice none of this is about shaming or saying candy is evil. It's about empowering your child to enjoy some things, make better educated choices, and move on. It's a skill that they're going to need for the rest of their life. Okay, so here are some key takeaways. Here's what you need to know about Halloween candy. It's not just about the sugar, it's about the dyes, the preservatives, the fillers in popular kids' candies that stress out their brains, immune systems, and energy. You also need to know that candy is junk food, and it's okay to call it that. What harms kids isn't the word, it's shame, secrecy, and tying food to their worth. Boundaries with love. Oh, sorry. Boundaries with love are going to build resilience. Okay, so we can call food junk food. It's not going to damage their self-esteem. Again, what is really important is that we're not shaming them, hiding it from them, taking it away when they're not looking. We really want them to be part of the process. And doing things where we're empowering them to make better choices and giving them better options than what they've been presented. Don't be fooled by the marketing, right? Big Food has paid some of these influencers and dietitian organizations, people that are actually giving dietitians their licenses to push the idea that there are no bad foods. And that is a lie. There's no actual evidence that if you say a food is bad, you're going to create a child with an eating disorder. I don't know where they came up with that, but people are buying this because it's coming from a health professional. But again, that's marketing that has been bought and paid for by the food industry. And that narrative is going to serve the company's interests and not your health or not the health of your child. All right, number 4, you can set boundaries and still make Halloween special. Things like the Switch Witch, candy buybacks, trade systems, reframing the night around fun, and teaching kids to understand labels with this or something better are all great options. The goal isn't restriction. It's on education, empowerment, and helping your child feel confident about making smart choices. On Halloween night and on all of the other nights that are filled with sugar and sweets and candy. So when candy bags come home, remember, you're not the fun police. You're the lighthouse. You set the boundaries, you shine the light on the truth, and you guide your kids towards choices that are going to support their body, their mind, and their confidence. And if you know, your children's picky eating did not start with Halloween candy. It's probably been there for years. Waiting it out is not working. That's why I created my program, Unlocking Mealtimes, but definitely start at the pickyeaterstest.com. Like I said, it's your first step to moving forward is identifying what category your child fits into when it comes to picky eating so that we know what steps to take next. Because sometimes when we are using strategies meant for a curious kid and they're fearful, those strategies will backfire. So we want to do things in a certain order, a way that makes sense. We want to build really strong foundations for them to, flourish on. But we can't do that if we're using the wrong strategies because they're at the wrong level. Okay. So please, visit us at thepickeaterstest.com if you feel like that's a good match for you. Remember, you're not the fun police. You're the lighthouse, and your job is to guide, shine light, and keep your child safe while letting them enjoy this season. I always tell my son, it's mommy's job to keep you safe. It's not my job to make sure that you're having fun 24 hours a day. I love you, but because I love you is why we're doing these things. If mommy didn't love you, she'd let you eat, go, do, sleep, wherever, however, as long as you want. That's not me. I'm not going to do that. And I do feel like my son does respect that. I hope that these strategies will help you because I know this time of year is tricky. And again, this time of year, Halloween is just the first of this sort of cold and flu season, which I'm sure if you've seen online, it's cold and flu season because you're indoors all day and you're constantly giving your body these sugar hits and sweets and these foods that have preservatives and not so great ingredients in them. And then we wonder why our bodies are struggling to, fight these colds that we don't have the rest of the year. So remember that, we want to try to keep the kids as healthy as possible. It's really hard to do when their bodies are inundated with all of these extra ingredients. So remember that by holding these boundaries, you're also hopefully helping to save yourself and your child from, a couple of extra, colds and flus that might come around this time of year. I know it's a really tricky time of year for that, but it all starts with a lot of these. It's a very sugar-laden time of year, and that definitely amplifies and contributes to the rise in different diseases and colds and things like that pop up this time of year. So I do hope that it's the start of a healthy holiday season for everyone. And I hope that you feel more empowered and less scared of this time of year. All right, we will see you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater. To learn more about achieving your child's feeding goals, check out Christine's website at foodologyfeeding.com. And be sure to tune in next time to How to Unpicky Your Picky Eater.